The Secret Garden, a sleep meditation. There is a place I want to take you tonight, not far from here, not in another world or another time, but tucked quietly behind the walls of an old European city, a city of cobblestones and iron railings, of tall stone buildings pressed close together, of windows glowing amber in the early evening, and the distant sound of bells marking the hours. You have walked this city before, perhaps, or one very much like it. You know the feeling of its streets, the slight uneven press of old stone beneath your feet, the way the buildings lean close enough overhead that a grey afternoon feels almost intimate. The smell of coffee and old paper drifting from doorways. It is a beautiful city, but it is also a busy one. And tonight, almost by accident, you are about to find something within it that almost no one knows exists. A garden, hidden, ancient, still. A place where the city seems to hold its breath. Come with me. Welcome to Dreamy Night Facts, the gentle learning channel. This is your quiet place, a space set apart from the noise and movement of the day, designed only for rest, for stillness, for the soft drift toward sleep. Tonight we are not telling history. Tonight we are simply going somewhere beautiful together, somewhere slow, somewhere that asks nothing of you, except that you allow yourself to arrive. If you enjoy tonight's meditation, please consider giving it a like. It helps more people find their way here. And if this kind of gentle content is what you need, subscribe and ring the bell. New meditations and sleep stories arrive regularly whenever you need them. Now, set everything else aside. The garden is waiting. Before we begin to walk, let us simply be still for a moment. Let your body settle wherever it is resting right now. Feel the weight of it, the heaviness of your limbs, the soft pressure of the surface beneath you. There is nothing you need to adjust, nothing you need to fix. You are already exactly where you need to be. Take a slow breath in. Feel your chest and your belly rise gently with it. And breathe out slowly, letting the breath leave in its own time. Not pushed, not hurried, just released. Again. Filling yourself gently, the way a still pond fills with morning light, from the edges inward, gradually, without effort, and out. The tension in your shoulders softening a little, your jaw loosening, the muscles around your eyes releasing. Once more. In and out. Good. Notice how your body already knows how to rest. It does not need to be taught. It only needs to be allowed. With each breath now, let the weight of the day begin to settle downward, like silt, drifting slowly to the bottom of a deep, clear lake. The thoughts, the conversations, the small, unfinished things that have been following you. Let them drift down, gently, out of reach. Not gone, just resting, just set aside for now. You are safe here. You are warm. You have nowhere to be and nothing to do except follow this voice very gently, very slowly into a garden that has been waiting for you longer than you know. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already, and let us begin. It is late afternoon in the city, the kind of afternoon that arrives in autumn, cool at the edges with a low golden light that seems to come not from above, but from somewhere within the stone itself, as though the buildings have been storing warmth all day and are only now beginning to release it slowly back into the air. You have been walking, not with any particular destination in mind, just moving through the city the way you sometimes do. And the day has been long, and the body needs to unknot itself through motion. Turning down streets you haven't taken before, following the light where it falls most softly, letting the city lead. The street you're on now is narrower than most. You almost didn't turn into it, but something caught your attention. A quality of the air, perhaps. A faint coolness that didn't quite match the direction of the breeze. Or perhaps it was a sound. Something green and distant, like water or wind moving through leaves, carried for just a moment on a shift of air before disappearing again. You stopped. You listen. And then you turn. The street is old. Older than the streets around it. The cobblestones are larger and less even, worn smooth in the center, where feet have walked for centuries. Rougher at the edges, where the moss has crept in from the walls on either side. The buildings here are taller, their facades faded to a pale grey gold, their shutters closed against the afternoon. There is no one else here. The sounds of the city, the murmur of traffic, the voices from open windows, the rhythmic sound of footsteps on busier streets. All of it has softened behind you, muffled by the turn you made, by the height of the walls, by something else that you can't quite name. A quality of stillness that seems to exist here independently. Not the absence of sound, exactly, but the presence of quiet, as though the silence itself has texture and weight. You walk slowly. Your footsteps sound different on these older stones. A softer percussion, more felt than heard. Ahead, the street curves gently to the left, and as you follow it around, you see, set into the wall on your right, a gate. It is iron, very old iron, the kind that has moved past rust into something more permanent. A deep, almost black patina that speaks not of neglect, but of age, of decades of weather, absorbed and held. The ironwork is elaborate. Twisting vines and leaves cast into the metal. A design that was once purely decorative, but has now become almost indistinguishable from the real vines that have grown up through it and around it over the years. The gate stands slightly open, wide, only a hand's width or so, just enough that you can see a narrow sliver of what lies beyond, a glimpse of green, so deep and soft, it seems almost impossible, this close to the city's center. A breath of cooler air slips through the gap, carrying with it the smell of water and earth and something floral, sweet and faint and very old. You stand before it for a moment. There is no sign, no indication of what lies beyond. Only the gate, slightly open, and that narrow strip of impossible green. Your hand reaches out. Your fingers curl around the iron, cool and slightly rough beneath your palm. The texture of age and weather and time. You push it gently open. The sound changes the moment you step through. It is subtle at first, so subtle you almost miss it. But within a few steps, you become aware that the city has receded in a way that doesn't quite make sense for how far you've walked. The stone walls of the street behind you should still be close enough to hear a voice raised in conversation, or the sound of a bicycle on cobblestones. But what reaches you instead? Almost nothing. Only the garden. And the garden is speaking in its own quiet language. Water, somewhere nearby. Not rushing. Nothing as urgent as that. A slow, continuous sound, like a thought that has been turning gently in the same direction for a very long time. Patient, unhurried. The soft movement of leaves. There is a breeze here, a small private climate held within the walls. It moves through the branches above you in slow shifting waves, and each wave carries sound, a whispering, a susurration, like a very large, very gentle exhalation. And beneath these sounds, underpinning everything, silence. The deep, soft silence of a place that has been quiet for a very long time, that has grown accustomed to its own stillness, that does not require anything from those who enter it, except that they too become still. You breathe in. The air is extraordinary. not perfumed in any aggressive sense. Not a single flower forcing itself forward, but layered, complex, in the way that only very old places are. Earth, damp and rich, carrying the memory of many seasons, of fallen leaves, composted back into themselves. Water, clean and mineral, and faintly cool. Something green, the particular green smell of growing things, of chlorophyll and bark, and the quiet chemical processes of plants going about their slow business. And beneath all of this, that sweetness again. Wisteria, you think, though you can't yet see it. Or perhaps jasmine, or something older than either. Something you have no name for, but recognize somewhere deep in the body as beautiful. The path before you is stone. Flat, irregular slabs set into the earth at intervals, the spaces between them filled with soft moss, of a green so vivid it seems almost to produce its own light. The moss is thick enough to give slightly under your foot, and this small cushioning, this slight forgiveness in each step, slows you down immediately, involuntarily. Your body recognizes that this is not a place for hurrying. You take one slow step, and then another. On either side of the path, the garden unfolds. It is not a maintained garden, not in the formal sense. There are no straight lines here, no beds of flowers arranged in deliberate patterns, no topiary or clipped edges. Whatever order this garden once had, and you sense from the bones of it that there was order once, that someone designed this place with great care and great intention, has long since been softened by time into something more organic, more honest perhaps, more alive. Shrubs have grown beyond their original shapes and stretched their branches into the path of the light. Climbing plants have moved from their intended supports onto surrounding trees, draping themselves in long curtains of leaf and stem. Flowers grow where they have chosen to grow, in the cracks between stones, along the edges of walls, in the shadows of larger plants, where perhaps they were never intended to be, but where they have found the conditions they needed and simply begun. There is a beauty in this that a more tended garden could not quite achieve. the beauty of a place that has been allowed, that has been trusted over time to find its own way. You walk slowly between these green breathing walls, and ahead of you, the path curves gently around a stand of tall bamboo, their stems pale gold and green, clicking softly in the breeze, like the world's most patient percussion. And beyond them, you see the lake for the first time. It is larger than you expected. Not vast, not the kind of lake that has horizons and weather of its own, but generous, wide enough that the far bank, where the willow trees trail their long hair into the water, feels like a different country, wide enough to hold a sky. And the sky it holds tonight is extraordinary. The water is so still, so absolutely, miraculously still, that the reflection in it is not a reflection in any ordinary sense. It is a duplication. The pale gold of the late afternoon sky, the deep blue-gray of the approaching dusk, at the edges, the single wisp of cloud, moving so slowly, it might not be moving at all. All of it is there, below the surface, as clear and as complete as above it. You find yourself uncertain for just a moment, which is the real sky and which is the one held in the water. And this uncertainty is not troubling, but deeply calming, as though the question of which direction is up has been gently set aside for now, and it doesn't matter at all. The banks of the lake are irregular, natural feeling. In places, the grass grows right down to the water's edge. In other places, flat stones have been arranged long ago by careful hands to create small landing areas, places where a person might sit and look outward across the water. The stones are dark with age and dampness, covered in the same soft moss you felt underfoot on the path. And the water lilies, they are extraordinary. They float in loose, unhurried clusters across the surface of the lake, their leaves broad and flat and very dark green, each one slightly different in shape, slightly different in the way it sits on the water. Some perfectly flat, some curled at the edges, as though still deciding whether to open. Them the flowers. White, most of them. That particular white that seems almost to glow in low light, as though the flower is remembering the sunlight it absorbed during the day and releasing it now, very gently, in the cooler air of early evening. Some are fully open, their petals spread in perfect concentric rings around a heart of deep yellow. Others are still closed, rising from the water on their single stems in elegant, tapered points, waiting for the morning. They do not move. Nothing in this garden seems to move quickly. Even the slight breeze that stirs the bamboo and shifts the willow's trailing branches does not trouble the water lilies. They rest on the surface of the lake with the absolute composure of things that have been doing exactly this, floating, blooming, waiting, resting for a very long time, and intend to continue quietly and without any urgency whatsoever for a very long time more. You stand at the edge of the water for a while. There is a flat stone here, dry and wide enough to sit, and you lower yourself onto it slowly, your legs crossing easily, your hands resting in your lap, your back finding its own comfortable angle without any effort from you. The stone is cool but not cold. The surface is smooth, where countless people have sat before you, or perhaps where the water has kissed it repeatedly over centuries, wearing away all roughness until only this remains. A surface like something finished, something resolved. The lake breathes around you, very slowly, almost imperceptibly. Small rings spread outward from places you can't quite identify. A surface disturbance too small to see. Perhaps a water insect. Perhaps a falling leaf. Perhaps simply the water making its own private adjustments. Each ring is perfect. Each one travels outward in its patient circle until it reaches the edge of other rings, and they merge together, becoming something larger and less defined, and then dissolving entirely back into stillness. You watch this for a while, and as you watch, you notice that your own breathing has synchronized with something here. In, and the branches lift almost imperceptibly. Out, and they settle again. In, the garden breathing, and you breathing with it. After a while, you are not sure how long, you rise from the stone and follow the bank of the lake to your left. The path here is narrower, closer to the water. In places, it almost disappears entirely, the grass and the moss growing over it, so that you are walking partly on stone and partly on something soft and yielding. You don't mind. The slowness it imposes on you feels right, intentional even, as though whoever made this garden understood that a person walking beside still water should be made to walk carefully, attentively, brought into the present moment by the small, quiet demands of an uneven path. The willow trees are ahead of you. There are 3 of them, growing close together on a small promontory that extends gently into the lake. A natural platform of earth and root, raised just enough above the waterline that the tree's roots, reaching down through the bank, must extend far below the surface. They are old trees. You can tell this from the scale of their trunks, wide enough that your arms would not meet if you tried to embrace one. The bark deeply ridged and furrowed in the way of very old wood, the kind of texture that invites the hand without asking permission. But it is their canopy that stops you. The branches of a willow do not grow upward. They grow outward and then curve gently, gradually, following the pull of their own weight downward. And the branchlets that hang from these branches, covered in their long, narrow leaves, continue downward still, reaching for the water with a patience and persistence that is, when you really look at it, quietly extraordinary. Each strand is slightly different in length. Each moves in its own time, its own rhythm. Together they create a curtain, a living, breathing, continuously moving curtain that hangs between the canopy above and the water below. In the breeze, they sway, not dramatically, not in the way of trees in storms, throwing their weight around and announcing themselves to the sky. Quietly, with the particular quality of the movement that only very long, very fine things have. A swaying that begins slowly and continues past the point where you expect it to stop, and then comes back again and continues past that point too. like something that has given up, fighting the forces that move it, and simply moves fully, fluidly, without resistance. The ends of the longest strands touch the water. Just touch it, resting on the surface in soft curves, each one surrounded by the smallest of ripples. A continuous, gentle disturbing of the stillness that somehow makes the stillness more noticeable rather than less, as though the ripples are there to remind you what stillness is, as though the tree has been drawing circles on the water all its life, not for any purpose, but because it could, because the water was there, and the branch was there, and the reaching down was simply what happened between them. You stand among these trees for a long moment. The light here is different, filtered through the hanging branches. It falls in shifting patterns on the ground and on the water below. Soft, dappled, constantly moving as the strands sway. The sound too is different here, more enclosed. The curtain of branches around you softens the sounds of the wider garden, wraps you in something quieter still. The click of the bamboo is distant now. The sounds of the city, which you had already almost forgotten, are entirely gone. There is only this, the soft sound of the water, where the willow touches it, the movement of light, the smell of the lake very close, green and cool and faintly sweet, and your own breathing, slow and easy, matching the rhythm of the branches without any effort at all. The bridge reveals itself as you continue along the bank, not dramatically, not as a sudden discovery, but gradually, the way things in this garden seem to prefer to reveal themselves. First, a glimpse of its curved rail through the hanging willow branches. Then its reflection in the water, more visible than the bridge itself. For a moment, the arch doubled in the still surface, making a perfect circle of stone and reflection. Then the bridge itself, fully visible, spanning the narrowest part of the lake, where the two banks come closest together. It is an old bridge, stone, like everything else in this garden that has been here longest. a single, graceful arch, wider at the base and narrowing as it rises to the center, built in a style that speaks of somewhere farther east, of the same sensibility that chose the water lilies, that placed the bamboo, that looked for stillness and found it in clean curves and careful proportion. The stone is a warm grey, pale where the sun has touched it most often, darker at the waterline and in the sheltered angles of the arch, where the moss has established itself in thick, soft colonies. The handrails are simple iron, not ornate like the gate, but plain and functional, slightly cool when you rest your hand on them as you step onto the bridge. And you step onto it slowly. The stone beneath your feet is slightly convex, following the curve of the arch. And this means that with each step toward the center, you are very slightly ascending. A gentle rise that makes the body straighten almost automatically, that lifts the gaze outward and upward. And at the highest point, at the crown of the arch, you stop and look. The view from here is unlike the view from anywhere else in the garden. From the bank, you look across or along the water. From the willow trees, you look through. But from here, from this highest point of the bridge's arc, you can see the whole lake at once. The full spread of it. The clusters of water lilies distributed across its surface like a loosely scattered thought. The far bank with its taller trees, whose reflections reach toward you from below. The small promontory, where the willows stand, their curtain of branches moving in the breeze. And it is quiet up here. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of a height. Even this modest height, this few extra feet above the water surface, gives the sounds of the garden a slightly different quality. They arrive from below, from around, rather than at the same level. The breeze is more noticeable here, moving more freely above the water than through the enclosed spaces of the bank. It touches your face, cool and clean, and carrying that complex scent of the garden, all its layers present at once. You rest your arms on the iron rail. You look down at the water beneath the bridge and find it very dark here, shaded by the arch, the surface not reflecting sky, but simply holding its own darkness, smooth and deep. A single water lily has drifted to the edge of this shadow, half in light and half in the dark beneath the bridge. Its white petals luminous on the lit side, softly faded on the other. The boundary between the two, as gradual and as gentle as the line between sleeping and waking. You stay here for a while. There is no hurry. The bridge is patient. The water is patient. The garden is the most patient thing you have ever been inside. And its patience, this absolute, unhurried, generous patience, is beginning to move into you, to take up residence in your shoulders, your chest, the muscles around your eyes, the particular tension of a person with somewhere to be and something to do is releasing very slowly, the way ice releases in warmth, not all at once, but from the edges inward, gradually, inevitably. You breathe, and the garden breathes around you. On the far side of the bridge, the garden changes character. The bank here is more heavily planted, trees growing closer together, their canopies touching overhead in places, creating a kind of natural tunnel of green. The light is lower, more filtered, more intimate. The path winds, rather than proceeding directly, as though designed to slow and confuse the sense of direction, to dissolve the feeling that you are traveling toward anything in particular, and replace it with the simpler feeling of simply being somewhere very beautiful. It is along this winding path, perhaps 50 steps from the bridge, that you find the statue. It is ancient. Even from a distance, before you can make out its details, you understand this. There is something about very old stone, a quality of presence, a density, a way of occupying space that newer things don't quite have, that communicates itself immediately to something in the body that precedes conscious thought. Your pace slows without your deciding to slow it. You approach without urgency. The statue depicts a figure seated in stillness. Not rigid stillness, not the stillness of stone imitating life and getting it slightly wrong, but the deep, inhabited stillness of someone who's been sitting quietly for a very long time and has no intention of stopping. The posture is easy. The hands rest gently in the lap. The expression, worn now by centuries of weather, softened by the slow, patient work of rain and frost and the lichen that has taken hold in the deeper lines of the face, carries something that you find yourself thinking of as peace. Though the word feels slightly too small for what you see, the figure is dressed in robes that fall in long, simple folds. These folds have captured over the decades the most extraordinary collection of miniature worlds. Tiny ferns growing from the creases, soft grey-green lichen covering the flatter surfaces, a single small flower you can't identify, growing from a crack at the base where the statue meets its plinth. The plinth itself is almost entirely subsumed by moss, so that the statue appears to have grown from the ground rather than being placed upon it, as though it arrived here, before the garden, before the city, before the streets and the walls and the iron gate, and everything else has grown up around it in acknowledgement. There is a small flat stone before the statue. You sit. The stone is cool and perfectly sized, as though it has been waiting here for exactly this, for someone to come and sit quietly, without agenda, simply to rest in the presence of something that has been still for a very long time and radiates that stillness outward like warmth. You sit with the statue for a while. There are birds somewhere above you in the canopy. Small birds moving through the upper branches with tiny sounds. The occasional very brief note of birdsong that arrives and is gone before you fully register it, like a thought that surfaces and then returns to the deep. Somewhere behind you, the lake is still doing what it has always done. The willow trees are still swaying. The water lilies are still floating. All of this continues. And here, before this ancient, patient, mossy, extraordinary figure, you simply rest. Your eyes may close, if they haven't already. Your breathing settles. Something in you that has been held, carried, braced, managed for a long time begins very quietly to set itself down. You don't know how long. You sit with the statue. Time moves differently here. Not faster, not slower exactly, but less insistently. Less like a current you are swimming against, and more like a very gentle pool in which you simply float. When you rise, you feel the difference in your body, a quality of ease that wasn't there before, a looseness in the limbs, a settledness in the chest, as though something that was clenched has been carefully, patiently opened. You follow the path further, deeper into this greener, more enclosed part of the garden. The path narrows. The planting on either side grows more dense. Shrubs whose branches reach across at shoulder height, requiring you to duck slightly in places, to turn sideways, to be attentive in a way that is not effort, but simply presence. You notice everything here. The texture of a leaf you brush with your hand, waxy on top, soft and faintly textured beneath. The way the light falls in long diagonal shafts through gaps in the canopy overhead, each shaft containing its own small weather of floating particles, dust and pollen, and there, infinitely small debris of living things going about their business. The sound of your own careful footsteps on the path. And then the path opens, and you find yourself in a pergola, or rather, in what was once a pergola and has now become something more, like a room built by a plant. The structure itself is old wood and old iron, a simple framework of posts and crossbeams that creates a rectangular space, perhaps 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. But the wisteria that was once trained to grow over this structure has long since exceeded its original brief and taken over entirely. The stems of the wisteria are extraordinary. They are old stems, thick and twisted in the way of very old wood, wound around the iron supports in tight spirals that have over decades become permanent, have fused almost completely with the metal they were wound around, so that it is no longer quite clear where the iron ends and the plant begins. These main stems branch and rebranch above your head into a canopy so dense that it forms a living ceiling. A ceiling that moves very slightly with the breeze, and that in spring must be absolutely remarkable. long, hanging clusters of blossom. Pale purple, you imagine them, cascading down between the leaves, filling this small, enclosed space with a scent so sweet and so dense, it must be almost overwhelming. But even now, without the flowers, this is extraordinary. The light that comes through the wisteria canopy is green, deeply, luminously green, filtered through layer upon layer of leaf until it has shed every wavelength except this one, until the space beneath is washed entirely in this cool, soft, extraordinary green. It falls on your hands and on the worn wooden bench that runs along one side of the pergola, and it transforms both. Your skin looks different here. The bench looks different. Even the air looks different, as though the space inside the pergola exists in a slightly different version of reality than the space outside it. You sit on the bench. The wood is smooth and warm, warmer than you expected, as though the dense canopy above has been holding heat. It yields slightly under you, a quality of very old wood that has been sat upon many times, that is given to human weight for so long. It has developed a kind of memory of it. The wisteria moves above you, slowly, its thick old stems barely moving, but the finer outer growth, the most recent season's extension, swaying in the breeze that finds its way through even here, swaying in long, lazy arcs that carry the light with them, so that the green glow around you shifts and breathes like something alive, which of course it is. You lean back against the rough old wood. Your eyes trace the ceiling of stems and leaves above you, the extraordinary complexity of it, the way the branches divide and subdivide and interweave until it becomes impossible to follow any single one, until you stop trying and simply see the whole, the dense, breathing, shifting whole. You rest here. There is nowhere else to be. The garden has more to give. When you are ready, and readiness here is not a decision, but simply a feeling, a gentle sense of being drawn forward, rather than of choosing to move. You leave the pergola by a gap in the wisteria on its far side, where the plant has pulled away slightly from the structure, creating a natural doorway framed in old twisting stems. The path continues. You are deep in the garden now. The walls of the city are invisible, inaudible. If you didn't know that beyond the old stone walls and the iron gate, there were streets and buildings and the whole busy apparatus of urban life, you might not believe it. The garden has its own completeness, its own self-sufficiency, its own climate, and its own logic. And it requires nothing from outside itself, except the sky above it and the water that falls into it from that sky and finds its way eventually into the lake. Around a gentle curve in the path, half hidden behind a screen of bamboo, taller than you are, you find a small stone seat set into a niche in the garden wall itself. The wall here is very old, older than the garden you suspect, part of some earlier structure that predates whatever was built above it. The stone is pale and rough, with plants growing from the joins between the blocks. Small ferns, their fronds arching outward into the air with perfect unhurried elegance, and something with tiny yellow flowers. It has no interest in identifying itself and simply blooms. The seat is barely wide enough for one person. Private, almost hidden. The kind of seat that suggests someone long ago wanted a place where they could not be seen from the main paths of the garden. A place of genuine solitude within a place already quietly separate from the world. You sit. From here, you can see a small section of the lake through a gap in the bamboo. Just a rectangle of still water, framed by green, with a single water lily visible at the edge of the frame. The lily is in shadow now, the afternoon having moved further toward evening while you have been exploring. Its white petals have a different quality in this lower light. Less bright, more soft, more like something glowing from within than something reflecting from without. A bird lands on the lily pad. A small bird, grey and brown, compact, entirely unbothered by the world. It sits on the edge of the pad and looks at the water with an expression of complete, professional concentration. Then it is gone, lifting away in the particular abruptness of small birds, there and then not there. The pad rocking very slightly with the departure, sending a small ring outward across the water, and then settling again. The ring spreads and spreads and is gone. You breathe further along the wall, past the seat and around another bend. You find a different kind of hidden space. Not a seat, but an archway cut into the garden wall, leading into a small enclosed area beyond, perhaps 4 meters square, entirely enclosed on all sides by walls and by the plants that grow against them. The floor of this small courtyard is paved in the same irregular flat stones as the main paths, but here they are almost entirely covered in moss. A carpet so thick and so uniform that the hardness of the stone beneath is only a theoretical fact, something you know rather than feel. In the center of this space is a stone basin, very low, barely above the level of the floor. It is filled with water, still water, very dark, reflecting the narrow rectangle of sky visible above it, and around its edge, just at the waterline, a ring of moss, the same deep, luminous green as everywhere else in this garden, growing right down to the surface of the water and in places slightly into it, blurring the boundary between the stone basin and the element it contains. You kneel beside it. The water is still enough that you can see your own reflection. Dim, softened by the slight texture of the surface, unrecognizable in any specific sense, but unmistakably you. Here, in this hidden garden, in this secret corner, in this still and perfect moment. You stay kneeling for a long time. The light is changing. You notice it first in the color of the water lily petals. They have shifted from white to the faintest possible blush of gold, catching in their surfaces the last warmth of the afternoon light as the sun moves toward the horizon beyond the garden's walls. Then, in the sky above the lake, which has been deepening through shades of blue-gray towards something richer, something with violet in it, something that speaks of the coming hours. The garden does not resist this change. It receives it as it seems to receive everything with complete openness, complete stillness, complete absence of struggle. The shadows lengthen, and the garden allows them to lengthen. The warmth fades, and the garden releases it without holding on. The colors shift, and the garden simply becomes, moment by moment, the colors it is becoming. There is a lesson in this that your body is understanding, even if your mind is not putting it into words. You have made your way back to the lake. You are sitting again on the flat stone at the water's edge. The same stone you found at the beginning, or perhaps a different one. It doesn't quite matter. The stone is cooler now. The air is cooler. But you are not cold. There is something about this garden, about the density of its planting and the shelter of its walls, and perhaps something else, something less explainable, that holds a warmth, even as the day releases its light. The water lilies are closing. This is something you didn't know would happen until you see it. The petals drawing inward, the flowers folding themselves back toward their center with the same unhurried certainty. They will unfold with tomorrow morning. They do not rush to close. They close at the speed the closing requires. No faster, no slower. Each flower in its own time, so that across the surface of the lake, the water lilies are at different stages. Some already closed, pointed stems in the dusky water, some halfway, some still open but beginning at the tips of their outermost petals, the faintest inward curl. The willow trees on the far bank are silhouettes now, dark against the paler sky, their hanging branches moving in the evening breeze. They are less individually visible than they were in the full light of the afternoon. More unified, more like a single thing than three separate trees, their details dissolved by the fading light into a mass of soft, swaying darkness that is extraordinarily beautiful in its simplicity. A mist has begun to rise from the surface of the lake. Just the smallest beginning of it. A thin veil, barely visible, hovering just above the water in the lowest places. It moves very slowly, following the small imperfection of the water's surface, pooling in the slight hollows where the lily pads float most thickly. It is not a cold mist. not a dramatic mist, just the lake beginning its nightly conversation with the air above it, exchanging warmth and water in the private language they speak together in these evening hours. You watch it form. The bamboo, which has been clicking and rustling gently all day, has grown quieter in the evening. The breeze less strong, the movement less. But occasionally, a larger breath of air moves through the garden and sets the bamboo speaking again. That particular sound, hollow and wooden and clean, a sound that is somehow both very present and very calming, that suggests both here and elsewhere, both now and some ancient quiet afternoon in a country very far away. Somewhere in the garden, a bird is singing. A single bird. Its song simple and unhurried. 4 notes, or 5, repeated with slight variations, the way a person hums to themselves when they are alone and content, and not thinking about anything in particular. The song fills the evening air without overwhelming it. It arrives and pauses and arrives again. It asks nothing. You listen. Your eyes are very heavy now. There is no reason to leave. This is a thought that arrives without drama, without any sense of decision. Simply a recognition. The gate through which you entered is behind you somewhere in the garden. And beyond it are the cobblestones and the amber windows and the old city going about its evening. And all of that will still be there. All of that can wait. Here, there is the lake becoming darker now, holding less sky and more of its own quiet depth. There are the water lilies, nearly all closed, their stems patient in the cool water. There are the willows, almost invisible now, against the darkening sky, their presence felt more than seen. A mass of soft, moving darkness. There is the bench by the water, or perhaps you have found your way to the pergola again, where the wisteria makes its green ceiling, and the old bench holds its patient warmth. It doesn't matter where exactly. The garden holds you. Let your body become heavy. Not the heavy of effort or exhaustion, but the good heavy, the satisfying, welcome weight of a body that has been somewhere beautiful and has absorbed that beauty and is now ready without struggle, to rest. Your limbs are very relaxed now. Your hands, wherever they rest, are heavy and still and warm. Your breathing is so slow and so easy that you can barely feel it. Just the gentlest rise, the gentlest fall, like the surface of the lake, responding to the smallest imaginable disturbance. The mist on the water has thickened a little. The bird has finished singing. The bamboo is almost entirely quiet. The garden breathes, and you breathe with it. And out. In and out. The darkness is soft here. Not the hard darkness of closed rooms and drawn curtains, but the gradual warm darkness of a garden at evening, full of small sounds and gentle movements, full of living things that do not sleep all at once, but drift into rest at their own pace, each in their own time. The wisteria above you, if you are under the pergola, moves almost imperceptibly. The water lilies float, closed and quiet, on the still lake. The ancient statue sits in its corner of the garden, as it has sat for a very long time, and as it will sit after you are gone. Patient, settled, radiating its quiet. The iron gate in the wall is slightly open still. The old city breathes beyond it. But you are here in the garden, and the garden is here around you. And between you and sleep, there is nothing now but the last few soft steps of this evening, these final easy breaths, this last gentle settling of everything into stillness. Let go of the day now. Let go of tomorrow. Let go of everything except this breath, this moment, this very soft and very beautiful darkness. The lake is still. The willows are still. You are still. And the garden holds you. It has always held the quiet things that find their way inside its walls. Gently, completely, without asking anything in return. Sleep now. You are safe here. You are held garden carry you into rest, into stillness, into the deep, soft dark of sleep. Good night. Sleep well. And when morning comes and you open your eyes, the garden will still be there, tucked behind its walls, waiting behind its old iron gate, slightly open, as it always is, for anyone who turns down the right street and listens for the sound of water among the leaves. It is always there. It is always waiting. Good night.